Right, hello ladies and gentlemen. Today I'm going to attempt to do you a nice instructional video. The tr6 here, which is soon going back to its owner, yes, it's still dusty, has got a little bit of a problem. I replaced the original headlights. They tested for continuity perfectly, but when I've used them, unfortunately, as you should be able to see there if I zoom in, all the smoke has escaped. These are seal beam original Lucas units. You can probably see my reflection in there, sorry about that. And unfortunately, one's gone on dip and one's gone on head. This one doesn't actually look as bad. Now, I've spoken to my customer about this, asked him if he'd like them replaced like for like. And what we're actually going to do is, because they weren't great headlights, when cars are like this were on the road and there were a lot of things different, so cars went a lot slower, there were less traffic, excuse me. And other cars didn't have such bright headlights like the new LEDs and the like. I suggested if it was, if you fancied doing it, to put a halogen conversion in there. So that's what I'm going to be doing today. I'll talk you through it. I'll do it a little bit of a stage at a time so you can see what's involved. It's not a huge job. It's not a huge amount of work. And it's quite simple to do. The kit I have purchased for him is a universal kit. It actually was designed for a Land Rover, but all cars like these, Minis, tr6s, Spitfires, GT6s, anything really back in the time with a 7-inch round headlamp will accept these conversions. And as you can see there, it looks very much like the seal beam. It's a flat face headlamp. I've used both in the past, and I actually prefer the light from a flat face headlamp. My eyesight is quite bad, so I need good headlamps. As you can see on the rear there, there's a slot to take a standard 60-40 watt Lucas, 6055, sorry, halogen bulb, okay? That will fit in there. Now for such as Minis and the like that don't have a separate side light, there's a plug there that allows you to put the side light in. That just pushes in. Obviously, this being a tr6, it won't need that because the side lights are built into the side light indicator units here. I will show you next about the wiring, because that's something that's come up in the past. People wondering if the wiring on the car is up to it or whether I need to put relays and things like that in to relieve the wiring pressure a little bit. Okay, so just bear with me a second. So if we come over to the Haynes manual, and if you look there, it says right-hand dip, normal. It's got USA, because obviously they took a lot of these cars to the USA. A lot of them came back again as well. The lowest wattage rate in there, power rating, is a 50-40. So the highest rating there is a 60, which is the same as what we're going to be putting in. So what we're going to do is compare. I'm going to compare the actual power and current usage, which will define whether we need to alter anything or place relays in, because the wiring is going to get too hot or anything like that. So, if you visit my whiteboard here, I'll talk you through how we work that out. So taking the pen, very, very simple. We're going to use an equation, P equals IV. Okay, that's an I. P is power, which equals current, multiplied, IV, by voltage. Okay? So, the power on the headlamp is going to be 60 watts maximum, so we're going to go for the big numbers. Obviously, that's the highest current it's going to have to deal with, which equals the current multiplied by 12. Now, we need to rearrange that equation. And if you've ever used this little triangle that I was taught at high school, absolutely excellent idea. So you put your P in the top, your I there, and your V there, which means if we want to work out the current here, that becomes the current equals the power over the voltage. So we know the power is 60. We know the voltage is standard 12. Okay. Oops, excuse me. Which means that our current is a maximum of 5 amps. Okay, absolute maximum. Now if we're charging at 14 volts that drops, but we'll want to go for maximums to make sure our wiring is up to the job. Okay, now if I take you back to the Haynes manual, you will see it says fuse unit, okay, which is the fuse box. The fuse ratings are all 35 amps, which means they are more than up to the job. Okay, a 10 amp fuse would be more than up to the job. 35 is definitely up to the job. If the wiring wasn't strong enough to support that, it wouldn't have a 35 amp fuse in there. And as we know, they used a 60 watt bulb before in the sealed beams in America, which will have used the absolute same wiring loom, I will guarantee it. So for that matter, we know that the wiring is safe without me having to put in a set of relays. I could put a set of relays in, but there's no point putting superfluous wiring for no reason at all. It adds to the cost, and it's completely unnecessary, and I don't like doing unnecessary work for me or the customer. Okay, so on to the fitting. So I've set my tripod up, hopefully you should be able to see it. I've got my tools here, nothing overly exotic, a posi drive screwdriver, a pair of snap nose pliers and a couple of small screwdrivers with slotted heads on. Okay, you may catch sight of my face during this process. Try to keep it out of there, not only because, you know, I'm quite embarrassed, but also I'm pretty good looking and I don't want to offset the filming on my looks. You know, this is about the car, not about me. So, taking the stumpy flat blade screwdriver, you can see I've already started to unscrew the screw. I'm going to wind that out. Now this vehicle has had new headlight balls put in here. Obviously if you're still using the old-fashioned metal headlight balls, they may be a bit more difficult to get the screws out of. There'll be a self-tapper the same. Wind that out with your fingers. Put it safely to one side with what you're doing so you don't lose it. And these unclip. Now this is the awkward bit, you have to sort of pop it off at the bottom and carefully remove it without scratching anything. And I'm just going to place that here on this cover on the car next to me so it doesn't get scratched. Now then, these are a more modern type of headlamp bowl. I favour the plastic ones, they just don't rust away. Okay, it's got the 3 adjusters, and at the bottom it's got the fulcrum for the adjusters, which has a posi drive screw in it. I'm going to remove that screw. Nice and easily. Support the light so it doesn't fall out. It shouldn't do. But shouldn't and don't are 2 different words. Remove the headlamp and unclip the wiring. Now I want to do that carefully so I don't damage the plug. You should be able to see here. The headlamp, not too concerned about breaking that anymore. It's only destined for the dustbin. So I'm going to remove these 3 screws here. You should be able to see on the retainers here that hold the headlamp in. Now the older type had a metal headlamp bucket there, okay, and a chrome trim ring over the top that pressed onto that and then screwed on. The process is very much the same. You remove the screws, thus. Again, I'm going to keep those screws together with the clip. Remove the second screw. Again, carefully. Keep it with the clip. And then the headlamp should just slot out and leave the last screw in place. Okay, now I'm making a note of that in my mind, of which way that was up. Alright, so that one faces the bottom 2 connections. So when I replace it with the new bulb, I should know which orientation to put it back in there. So again, I'm going to remove the lamp, put it on the floor, can't damage it any further. Just place that on there briefly, it won't do any damage. Okay, so adjusting the angle ever so slightly so you can see the headlamp. To change the bulb on the headlamp, very easy. Squeeze the 2 pins just like a modern vehicle and remove the plastic grommet that's just there to keep the damp and the dirt out. Place it on the box so it doesn't get broken. Take the bulb out of the packaging. Now then, this is where you have to be careful with the halogen bulb. You must not touch the glass. If you do, you can clean it. However, you must try to avoid it at all times. So you will see that I'm holding it by the pins. It doesn't matter if you touch those. You can see the layout of the guides on the rear. that goes into the headlamp thus. So the larger peg goes at the top. Then replace the clip. Easier done on a bench, but because I'm videoing it, I'll do it here. Thus, easy as that. And what we're going to do, I'll turn you back over here so you can see, all being well. What I'm going to do now is replace that back into here. Now, obviously these are aftermarket, so these may be a little deeper than the glass unit, but hopefully it should just slot straight back under there. These are the locators. As you can see, it did. It's a tight fit. Sometimes they're a little loose. You may have to modify these ever so slightly. Okay, so I'm then going to screw those back in. I'll pause you there for a moment whilst I screw the last of those in, because it's not the most exciting thing in the world. Okay, so now to continue on, you can see I've got the 3 clips screwed in here, here and here. Okay, I kept the datum correct, so those 2 connections here are adjacent to the one I left in, and I'm going to mount that back now into the headlamp bowl. Firstly, plug this wire on. The dip and headlight is wired the same way, so that simply pushes on carefully. Ensure that the connectors are pushed well in. That one's slid out a tiny little bit. Hook the furthest screw on first, the top screw on next. You can see there's a little ridge in those. It'll be difficult to see from there. I'll zoom in afterwards. And you need those to locate, otherwise it'll wibbly wobbly about. Take the long screw that you've carefully placed on the floor and replace that into the housing. Use your 3 pairs of hands to hold that in place and screw that back in. What I do with these is to allow us an amount of adjustability. These will need setting for the beam pattern. Screw that right in. We're not tightening it in. I'm not trying to win any awards, so run that in all the way, then back it off 1/4 of a turn. Okay, it doesn't need to be dog tight, just has to stop it wibbly wobbling about. Then as simple as that, replace the chrome trim. Now this can be an absolute living nightmare. There are some hooks here, here and here. What I do is I line up the screw hole that locates it here, keeping that level in, replace it thus, and simply screw the screw back in. Now, you may need to twist that a modicum just to get it in right. These are absolutely brand new stainless steel. They do need a little bit of polishing because they've got finger marks on and things. I will do that on pause. We're simply replacing the screw into this hole here. As I say, sometimes you have to fiddle about a little bit. It can be a little bit of a faff to get that in, so I'll do that off camera because you don't need to see me fiddling with the headlamp ring. Okay, so I'll pause you there and I shall do that little task. So there we go, the headlamp is now in. I think if you'll agree that if you look at the 2 headlamps together, you can barely tell any difference, but the light from that will be extremely higher intensity and much better to use. Okay, it's a pretty factory looking job. Everything goes back into where it belongs. To the untrained observer, you wouldn't know any difference. The screw is now in at the bottom. At a glance, it doesn't look overly different to the other headlamp. As I say, you can buy these with a dome on, like the original headlamp is domed here. I don't know if you can see it very clearly. Okay, there's a small dome on there. But in my experience, I've found the flat ones actually work a little better. So that's what I've gone with. All right, so I will post a video when I turn these on and get them adjusted and everything, but that'll be in a few weeks probably. I just need to change the other side. And they're ready for the customer. Lovely. Okay, I hope you like that video. I hope it's of some use to someone along the line. Thank you and good night.